Do you ever recite the right words about God and then live as if anything is permissible? Anything can go? The idea here is that head knowledge without heart worship actually produces idolatry in disguise. And in Deuteronomy chapter 4, we'll hear Moses call Israel back to wholehearted obedience, warn them against reproducing God in idols, and teach why remembering God's acts matters. And I'll give you one immediate action to keep memory from becoming myth in this episode of Biblical Unlocks. This show is designed to help build your habit of reading the Bible, understanding the Bible, and applying it in your daily life. If you enjoy episodes like this, please consider following and rating the show. It's free, it helps me out a lot, and you can always change your mind later. Now let's get a little bit of context into this particular chapter. So, Numbers chapter 4, what's happening here? Moses is actually going to open a pastoral prophetic address. He urges the people to obey God's statutes so that they may live and prosper. And he actually recounts the extraordinary encounter at Horeb, or Sinai, or the theophany, right? And we can go back to this later. And he warns fiercely against idolatry and copying foreign images of God, and explains the future risk of exile if Israel forgets this important characteristic. The chapter is actually rooting the law in memory, that is, knowing what God has done shapes how you worship and live. Okay, let's read verses 1 to 8. The focus here is going to be on obedience and how that leads to life and reputation among the nations. And my engagement question, so that you can stay engaged throughout this section, is: if obeying God brings blessing, why do we keep treating obedience like an optional sort of religious action as opposed to a religion in the sense of relationship with God? Okay, let's read. Verse 1. So now, Israel, give heed to the statutes and ordinances that I am teaching you to observe, so that you may live to enter and occupy the land that the Lord, the God of your ancestors, is giving you. You must neither add anything to what I command you, nor take away anything from it, but keep the commandments of the Lord your God with which I am charging you. You have seen for yourselves what the Lord did with regard to the Baal of Peor, how the Lord your God destroyed from among you everyone who followed the Baal of Peor, while those of you who held fast to the Lord your God are all alive today. See, just as the Lord my God has charged me, I now teach you statutes and ordinances for you to observe in the land that you are about to enter and occupy. You must observe them and perform them, for this will show your wisdom and discernment to the peoples who, when they hear all these statutes, will say, surely this great nation is a wise and discerning people. For what other great nation has a God so near to it as the Lord our God is whenever we call to him? And what other great nation has statutes and ordinances as just as this entire law that I am setting before you today? Alright, biblical unlock number 1. Obedience, in this case, leads to life and reputation. So, a common question you might have is, if obeying God really works, why do people resist it? Right? Obedience costs identity and control. And Moses insists that the law is not an arbitrary ritual. It is a roadmap for communal flourishing, for justice, order, and witness. The deeper point is that people resist obedience because obedience reshapes priorities, whether it be time, money, honor. But the promise here is practical. Obedience actually preserves life and gives the nation of Israel a distinct reputation before the world. That is why we hear the following verses. For what other great nation has a God so near to it as the Lord our God is whenever we call to him? And when they hear all these statutes, they will surely say, surely this great nation is a wise and discerning people. So it's a reputation here. It's a lifestyle that separates Israel from other nations. Okay, let's read verses 9 to 14. This is going to be concerning Sinai, right? We're going to be remembering Sinai, why this matters, right? And my question for you to stay engaged is, what would change if your children actually remembered God's acts instead of only hearing stories? So remembering versus hearing. Let's take a look. But take care and watch yourselves closely so as neither to forget the things that your eyes have seen, nor to let them slip from your mind all the days of your life. Make them known to your children and to your children's children. Verse 10, how you once stood before the Lord your God at Horeb. This is also Sinai. When the Lord said to me, assemble the people for me, and I will let them hear my words, so that they may learn to fear me as long as they live on the earth, and may teach their children so. You approached and stood at the foot of the mountain while the mountain was blazing up to the very heavens, shrouded in dark clouds. Then the Lord spoke to you out of the fire. You heard the sound of the words, but saw no form. There was only a voice. He declared to you his covenant, which he charged you to observe, that is, the 10 Commandments, and he wrote them on 2 stone tablets. And the Lord charged me at that time to teach you statutes and ordinances for you to observe in the land that you are about to cross into and occupy. Okay, biblical unlock number 2, remembering Sinai. Why does this memory even matter? Aren't stories enough? Why is there an obsession with remembrance? The idea is that repetition and public memory make a theological truth durable. Moses wants the people to avoid forgetting by second-generation amnesia, right? We often say that you'll probably have to go through the similar struggles that your great-grandparents had to go through because we've forgotten. We don't have that direct contact with them. And the struggles that they experience, whether it be cultural or societal, often tend to resurface because of that loss of memory, right? In the same way, repetition and public memory, that's what makes it consistent. That's what makes it durable. And if children, right, they don't rehearse the theophany, the covenant, the 10 Commandments, the faith it becomes a sentimental folklore, right? The memory here, it organizes identity, and children who remember live differently than those who merely inherit these rituals. It's about remembering what God has done for us. Okay, let's read verses 15 to 31 now. This is going to be warning against idolatry and future exile. So, my question for you is, how do subtle forms of idolatry creep into worship, whether it be ideas, images, or comforts? Verse 15. Since you saw no form when the Lord spoke to you at Horeb out of the fire, watch yourselves closely, so that you do not act corruptly by making an idol for yourselves in the form of any figure, the likeness of male or female, the likeness of any animal that is on the earth, the likeness of any winged bird that flies in the air, the likeness of anything that creeps on the ground, the likeness of any fish that is in the water under the earth. And when you look up to the heavens and see the sun, the moon, and the stars, all the host of heaven, do not be led astray, and bow down to them and serve them, things that the Lord your God has allotted to all the peoples, everywhere under heaven. But the Lord has taken you and brought you out of the iron smelter, out of Egypt, to become a people of his very own possession, as you are now. The Lord was angry with me because of you, and he vowed that I should not cross the Jordan, and that I should not enter the good land that the Lord your God is giving for your possession. For I am going to die in this land without crossing over the Jordan, but you are going to cross over to take possession of that good land. So be careful, lest you forget the covenant that the Lord your God made with you, and make for yourselves an idol in the form of anything that the Lord your God has forbidden you. For the Lord your God is a devouring fire, a jealous God. When you have had children and children's children, and become complacent in the land, if you act corruptly by making an idol in the form of anything, thus doing what is evil in the sight of the Lord your God, and provoking him to anger, I call heaven and earth to witness against you today, that you will soon utterly perish from the land that you are crossing the Jordan to occupy. You will not live long on it, but will be utterly destroyed. The Lord will scatter you among the peoples. Only a few of you will be left among the nations where the Lord will lead you. There you will serve gods made by human hands, objects of wood and stone that neither see nor hear nor eat nor smell. There you will seek the Lord your God, and you will find him if you search after him with all your heart and soul. In your distress, when all these things have happened to you in time to come, you will return to the Lord your God and heed him, because the Lord your God is a merciful God. He will neither abandon you nor destroy you. He will not forget the covenant with your ancestors that he swore to them. So I wanted to talk about something which I found which is quite interesting, right? Which is verse 24. Okay, so verse 24, we see that the Lord calls himself, quote, "For the Lord your God is a devouring fire, a jealous God." Okay, now the reason why I wanted to point this out is because this is something I struggled with. How can God be jealous? Isn't that a sin? Isn't jealousy or envy a sin? And I think it's important that I explain something here so that it is not confused. There are two types of jealousy, okay, and in the Bible we see jealousy being used in two different senses. The first type of jealousy, or what is called sinful jealousy, is human envy. That is, envy, insecurity, or resentment towards someone who has something we want. So, if you're angry because someone else succeeded, or if you want someone else's possessions or relationships, or you are threatened by someone else's status. And this kind of jealousy is condemned in the Bible, Galatians 5:19-21, where jealousy and envy are actually listed among sinful behaviors. And this form of jealousy is sinful because it comes from selfishness, pride, insecurity, and coveting what isn't ours. However, God's jealousy is different. This is a protective covenant love. When God calls himself jealous, he is referring to something very different, his exclusive claim to the worship and loyalty that rightfully belong to him. In the Bible, God's relationship with his people is often compared to marriage, just as a faithful spouse would be rightly upset if their partner was unfaithful, right? God is described as jealous when people worship other gods or idols. So this is exactly what we're seeing in Deuteronomy chapter 4, verse 24. The Lord your God is a consuming fire, a jealous God. So jealousy actually means zeal to protect a rightful relationship, not envy. So it isn't sinful to God because God alone deserves worship. If God is truly the creator and sustainer of everything, then worshipping anything else is misplaced. It protects people in the sense that in biblical thinking, right, idolatry leads people away from truth and toward destructive practices, and it reflects covenant faithfulness. Just like loyalty in marriage, God's jealousy reflects commitment to a relationship. So the difference here is that sinful jealousy would be, I want what you have, but God's jealousy is, you belong to me and I will not share you with any false god. Okay, now let's read the final section of the chapter, which is verses 32 onwards. And we're going to be examining the uniqueness of Yahweh and the choice to live. Okay, the choice to live. The Gospels repeat this, and I want you to stay engaged. I want you to question, what does it actually mean to choose life? What does that actually look like? Okay, let's read verse 32. For ask now about former ages, long before your own, ever since the day that God created human beings on the earth. Ask from one end of heaven to the other. Has anything so great as this ever happened, or has its like ever been heard of? Has any people ever heard the voice of God speaking out of a fire as you have heard, and lived? Or has any God ever attempted to go and take a nation for himself from the midst of another nation, by trials, by signs and wonders, by war, by a mighty hand and an outstretched arm, and by terrifying displays of power, as the Lord your God did for you in Egypt before your very eyes? To you it was shown so that you would acknowledge that the Lord is God. There is no other besides him. From heaven he made you hear his voice to discipline you. On earth he showed you his great fire, whilst you heard his words coming out of the fire. And because he loved your ancestors, he chose their descendants after them. He brought you out of Egypt with his own presence by his great power, driving out before you nations greater and mightier than yourselves to bring you in, giving you their land for a possession, as it is still today. So acknowledge today and take to heart that the Lord is God in heaven above and on the earth beneath. There is no other. Keep his statutes and his commandments, which I am commanding you today for your own well-being, and that of your descendants after you, so that you may long remain in the land that the Lord your God is giving you for all time. Verse 41. Then Moses set apart on the east side of the Jordan 3 cities to which a homicide could flee, someone who unintentionally kills another person, the two not having been at enmity before. The homicide could flee to one of these cities and live. Bezer in the wilderness on the tableland belonging to the Reubenites, Ramoth in Gilead belonging to the Gadites, and Golan in Bashan belonging to the Manassites. Verse 44. This is the law that Moses set before the Israelites. These are the decrees and the statutes and ordinances that Moses spoke to the Israelites when they had come out of Egypt, beyond the Jordan, in the valley opposite Beth Peor, in the land of King Sihon of the Amorites, who reigned at Heshbon, whom Moses and the Israelites defeated when they came out of Egypt. They occupied his land and the land of King Og of Bashan, the two kings of the Amorites on the eastern side of the Jordan, from Aroer, which is on the edge of the Wadi Arnon, as far as Mount Sirion, that is Hermon, together with all the Arabah on the east side of the Jordan, as far as the sea of the Arabah under the slopes of Pisgah. Okay, final biblical unlock. If God is uniquely powerful, why must I choose life? Knowledge of God's power, right, is not automatic obedience, because Moses frames faith as voluntary or volitional. God has acted decisively on Israel's behalf in ways that no other nation has seen before, and now they must respond by choosing covenant faithfulness. Choosing life means concrete obedience, justice, worship, and covenant care that embody trust rather than merely affirm it intellectually. Let's see how this chapter fulfills Jesus Christ. So, Deuteronomy chapter 4 has an emphasis on remembering God's mighty acts, resisting idolatry, and choosing life. All of this finds its fulfillment in Jesus Christ. Jesus is the living disclosure of the Father, the perfect Word who bridges the true, knowing and faithful doing. Where Israel was warned not to fashion God into an image, Christ reveals God in person. God's character, justice, mercy, and holiness are now embodied in Jesus, calling us to real worship, not image worship, and to obedience formed by encounter, not just legislation. As we read in Matthew chapter 22, verse 37, Jesus said unto him, Thou shalt love the Lord your God with all thy heart, thy soul, and with all thy mind. And that is what shapes true daily devotion. Love is what governs obedience. Alright, let's go through some practical applications. How can we apply what we've learned in this chapter? So, first things first, I think family memory is something important as well. I think this is a very good practice to have with family, even friends as well. There have been stories, there have been times in your past where God has miraculously saved you, a rescue, a provision, an answered prayer. Now, some people will say, well, I just don't remember anything. But the truth is, there is something. There is something. If you think hard enough, you'll be able to understand, okay, I know exactly what happened here, and it was God. There are certain things in my own life which I don't think I'll be able to explain. I have been able to explain without invoking God. So I want to do that, make it habitual, retell something that has happened, retell how God has actually saved you, helped you in innumerable ways. And the second thing is, you need to check for idol blind spots. That is, there are certain ways, and there are many ways nowadays, where you can actually be tempted to trust things, goods, more than God, whether it be your career, whether it be your security, whether it be your approval. And to identify this, you need to really question and ask yourself, if God wanted me to drop this right now, would you be willing to do that? And if your answer is no, that means you're not worshiping God. You're worshiping whatever it is that you're holding on to. So just keep that in mind as you move through your spiritual journey. Alright, well that's it for this episode of Biblical Unlocks. We saw how Deuteronomy 4 ties law to memory, how God acts at Sinai, and how that must be rehearsed so obedience becomes identity, not just a duty. We saw how it can be costly to be obedient, but Moses promises life, social stability, and reputation for the nation, and choosing life is voluntary. Knowing God's power requires embodied trust, which is expressed in justice, worship, and holiness. So, next time we're actually going to move from covenant memory to the pilgrimage's border negotiations in Deuteronomy chapter 5. We'll revisit the 10 Commandments and ask how a people formed by memory intentionally live out the law in daily life. You don't want to miss it. Anyways, if you enjoyed this episode, please consider rating the show and following. It's free, it helps me out a lot, and you can always change your mind later. Otherwise, just have a blessed day. And remember, if you're not in your word, you're in your feelings. Godspeed.